Hey everyone, this is Sandeep back with another video. And in today's video, we will continue to build our JavaScript project called Movie Mania. So let's jump into the video. So if you see here, right, I have created different folders for each video. So each video is going to have a different folder. So in the last part of the video, right, we have loaded some of the top movies, right? And I'm already running the application here. So I just wanted to show you, right? And I did some styling. So we left this application unstyled, but I did some styling. It took me some time, to style all of this list of movies and this header, hero or header, I can say. So you see here, right, this is looking beautiful now. So for styling the application, I have used Bulma. So Bulma is a very pretty good library, you just search for the Bulma and go to the docs and you can learn about it. So I have used, like, I'll show you the layout part where, if you see this hero, so this top part, right, this green part, so this I have just copied and pasted all of these styles from here, and I did some restructuring, and you see, right, I've added a section, then I have added a title, right? And before using Bulma, you need to add the link to Bulma. So I have used the CDN link to Bulma here. I'm going to focus on JavaScript part in this series, but I'll try to come up with something related to CSS also. So today we are going to build the autocomplete component where, but like now we have loaded the top movies right here, top 250 movies we are showing here. But I wanted to add a feature of search also where, you can search for the movie, you type something and that will bring in the results related to some movies. And later on, maybe we can do some comparison of two different movies also. So that is the idea. So we're going to build probably in multiple videos, we'll build the autocomplete components. In this part, we'll load the data and somehow, and in the next part of the video, we will show that data in the autocomplete component. So let's jump into the idea what we are going to build today. So this is the autocomplete component which I'm going to build. So say suppose there will be a text input, right? And there will be arrow, something like this. So if you type something like if I type INCE inception, it's going to bring me all the results or all the names related to that movie. Maybe there are multiple movies with the name of Inception. Or if you type Harry, maybe it will bring Harry Potter and some Harry other movies also. Okay. We're going to do it step by step. So in the step one, we will load data using the search term. So I'm going to put the input. If you type something, we'll load the data. Step two, we are going to add the input component and load data based on input value. Okay, that is step two, as I already said. And step three, we are going to add the debounce. Now, this is a really important concept I'm going to cover from scratch, how to write your own debounce function for the search feature. So yeah, I think this is the idea. Let's start coding. So I've created a folder 04, you see here, right? And I have my main.js and index.html file. Now, first of all, I'm going to add the input component. Or maybe you will start with loading data first. So, and I'm going to comment this part. I don't want to fetch the movie. So I'm going to start with a clean slate. So we don't have any data here. Now let's load some data. So to load data, I'm using the IMDb API. So obviously I need to open IMDb API Swagger link. And there is a link, right? So this API search, which I can use for, searching the movies, right? So I just need to pass the API key and expression. Expression is nothing but that name of the movie, right? So this is the API I'm going to use. So I'm quickly, I'll jump into my main.js and I'm going to write new function here. So we have already fetched top movies. Let's write a new function. I need to pull my mic down. Let's write a new function, say fetch movies. Fetch movies. And this is going to accept an argument called name. So that will be the name of the movie. Okay. Now I'm going to copy and paste this syntax because the reason is, this syntax will be very much similar what we are going to do here. So instead of fetching all 250 movies, I'm going to fetch one list of movies, based on the search term. So this function, I need to change it to async because I'm using the await syntax here. Okay. So I'm going to use Axios get, but this time I'm going to change the link to not API, but if you see here, this is search, API/search. So let's change it to search. So I'm going to go for a search, and then obviously I don't need to pass. Okay, I did a mistake actually. API, and the API name is search. Okay, and it requires two different arguments. First one is or query string parameters, I would say, API key, and the second will be expression. So let's type pass the second one, that is expression. And expression, I'm going to hard code the value for now, like in SEP. So I'm just going to type some portion part of the movie's name, right? Inception. Okay, so this is the idea, right? So I'm calling a new API now, and it's going to return me some response. So I'm going to just call it a response. If there is an error, we are going to show the error. Same syntax like how we have fetched top movies using XCRs. I'm just fetching the movies based on the name, but I'm not putting. So later on, we'll put the name. We'll get that name from the input. So let's save, and I'm going to call this fetch movies, and we will see what we are getting in the console. So let's save, and if everything goes well, I'm going to inspect, and I'll open the network panel. Probably we don't see anything in the network panel, but we'll see something in the console for sure. Okay, so nothing is coming in console. Let's refresh. Nothing is coming. So what went wrong? I'm calling the fetch movies async, and we are sending the request. Did I include this file? Yes, the file is included, and we are calling this IMDb API search, and we are rendering top movies here. I don't want to render top movies actually. I want to console.log my data. So that was a mistake. So let's do that. Let's console.log the response, and let's save. And now if I go back, see that we are getting the data. So now this time we are getting data, and inside data we have results. And these are the movies, right? I mean, these are all the list of movies which where the name starts with Inception. So you see Inception, the COBOL job, then we got Inception, jump right into the action. So there are different movies with the name of Inception. So now I got data, right? Now I'm going to take this data, and I want to render into autocomplete component. But before creating that, right, we need to load all of these movies based on what the user is going to type in the text input, right? So I'm going to add the input component. So I'll create a new section inside here, and let's add the input with type of text. And maybe we can use something like this also. Let's give it a class name of, let's say, name input, something like this. Okay, so now I'm going to grab this input here. So let's copy and paste this, because it will be same. So this will be name input, and I just need to change this to name input. So I'm grabbing using document.query selector that input component. Now if I go back, so you will be able to see the input component, right? Let's make it a little bit big. Okay, so now if I type something here, right, and I want to pass this name and load this data. Okay, so for that I'm going to use events. So I'll say name input dot add event listener. So we use add event listener for listening to the events. I'm going to listen for the input event, and I'm going to call a function on input. Right? Let's write this function on input. So this is my handler function, which is going to accept one argument, which is going to get one argument called the event object. And let's see what input we are getting, right? So let's do the console.log of e.target. So how to grab the value from that input? So you can use e.target.value for that. And let's see if it is working. So I'm going to type cannot read properties of null name input. Add event listener on input, right? What mistake I did? Name input. That's the name, right? Did I save it? Class name underscore input. Okay, sorry, I did a mistake. Name underscore. Okay, I need to use dash actually. That's the way we name classes. So I did a mistake here. Okay, so now if I go back and if I type something, say support inception, see that, sorry, see that I'm getting the data, right? Inception, IN, then INC, then INC. So now I'm going to grab this value and I'm going to fetch this data. Okay, so let's see. So on input, I'm going to call fetch movies here. Before that, maybe I'll grab the name of the movie, const name is equals to e dot target dot value. And let's call this function fetch movies and let's pass the name and let's use this name instead of this hard-coded value. I'm going to save, go back to my application. Now if I search for name, see that I got the response 1, 2, 3, 4 times, right? Because first time I got the response for n. If you see here expression n, what are the movies with the name of n? I thought of typing inception, but you see here, right? Then second time. So basically each time I'm typing here, right? So I'm going to clear this. So I'm typing here, say suppose I'm typing INCE. So first of all, it got the data for I, if you see here. So in the config, sorry, not in the config. What data I have passed, I need to see that actually. Okay, so I got the data for INC, right? Then I got the data for INCE also. I. So even the response is, not correct, right? I got the data for I later on. I got the data for INC first. Then I got the data for INCE. So you see that every time I'm typing, what is happening here basically? So I'm calling the fetch movies and it's sending the request on the IMDb API server and it's loading the data. I'll show you this ID on my tab actually. So this is what is happening, So I'm doing the key press, right? I'm pressing the key. So I was my first press, but I typed inception, quickly. But still, what happened? First, the request went for I to the IMDb API. Then it went for IN, then INC, then INCE. So each time I'm typing, I'm getting the data back from the IMDb API server. Somehow I need to stop it. Somehow I need to do it, when user is typing. See, I mean, what happens most of the time, user type for some time. And when user is going to wait for some seconds, like maybe 1 second or half a second, until then I should wait. Okay, now user is typing, don't send any request to the IMDb API. Wait. Wait until the user stop typing. As the user stops typing, I'm going to send the request to the IMDb API. That's what we want to implement. Okay. So let's do that. How we can do that? How we can stop sending this request on the server immediately. For that purpose, we're going to use, so on input here, I'm going to use the set timeout. So if you know set timeout is a function, right? In JavaScript, so I'm going to use set timeout and I'm going to hold on for some time, like maybe for a second, right? Until the user stops for a 1 second, so 1000. I'm going to wait and then I'm going to fetch the movie. So I'm going to move this code inside here, something like this. So now what is happening, when user is typing, I'm just setting the timeout and I'm going to fetch the movies only after 1 second has been lapsed. But this is not going to work this way, right? So I need to create another thing like called timeout ID. This will be normal empty value for first time. And that set timeout returns a ID which we can save, right? The timeout ID. So I'm going to check for the timeout ID first. Timeout ID. If timeout ID is there, right? I'm going to clear. Okay. So I'm going to clear my timeout with timeout ID. Okay. So now say suppose if the user is typing, so I made it const, actually I should make it let so that I can change its value. So the idea here is, right, what I'm doing. So when the user is typing, I'm checking with, okay, is there a value in the timeout ID? No. So go and call, I mean, set the timeout, right? And after that timeout, we are going to fetch the movies. Now, if the user is typing for like so many times, right, what is going to happen? It's going to set the timeout ID, right? It's going to come here. It's going to clear the previous timeout. So think like, I'm calling this function, but after 1 second. But if someone is already typing, right, because of this timeout ID, that fetch movie call is not going to work. So let's see this in action actually. So I'm going to refresh. And if you see here, I'm typing. Now, I'm not doing anything. I've waited or for 1 second and see that I got the data. So this is the idea, right? If I'm typing, it won't be sending any call. So I think I'm calling this function here also, fetch movies. Let's comment that. That's why we got two different output. Now let's see. So say suppose I'm typing. Now I'm not typing, right? So now it has sent the call. If you go to the network panel, right? It has sent the call to our search, right? We got the data back, and that's what we are showing here in my console. Probably I can show the console here, and I can show you the network panel. Somehow it is not coming. Come on, man. Okay, anyways. So I'm showing here, probably that's why network, and I'm showing the data is the console here, data. We're getting the data back. Okay, so this is the idea which I have implemented here, right? So this is the way I'm handling, we can use something called a set timeout in JavaScript so that, we can stop something to execute for a particular amount of time. Now, what is happening here, basically, we want to make this on input. So right now I have one input where, I'm setting the timeout, and based on after 1 second, or maybe I can change this value to 500 seconds also, I'm loading the data. But maybe I want to reuse this functionality, right? Maybe for another input. So this feature is basically called a debounce feature. This is the idea which we called as a debounce. So that, I can use it on other input also. And say suppose I want to reuse this functionality, right? In other areas also, I need to create a separate function related to debounce. Now, this idea of debounce already exists. You can Google it and you can just copy and paste it. But I wanted to cover it, and it's little bit difficult to grasp, to understand initially. But once you get hold of it, I think it will make you a better programmer. So let's understand the idea of debounce. So we are going to take this functionality from here, and we are going to write a debounce function for that. Okay, so let's implement this idea of debounce. So I'm going to write a function called debounce, which is going to take multiple arguments basically. So first of all, it's going to take one argument called a function. Now, what is the idea of debounce? So think like a debounce is like a decorator. So if you heard of a decorator pattern, right? So before doing some action, I want to modify that action, or maybe I want to do something. So there are like two different action happening, right? So maybe I'll show you. This is the idea I'm going to explain, but let's say suppose there is an action, the important action which you need to do, right? But before that action happens, if you want to do something called a pre-action. Okay, so this pre-action is nothing but the idea of your debounce, right? So your debounce, what it is going to do, so this debounce is going to accept this action as an input. So that is the value of that function I'm passing here, right? So I am basically modifying the behavior of your action. So before doing this action, first of all, I'm going to check whether this action can be done or not. Maybe I'm trying to give the example, or maybe it's putting like a shield. Okay, can you execute this action with whatever input you have given? Are you allowed, or are you authorized to do this particular action? So debounce is nothing but a function which accepts another function as an object. Okay, So I'm passing function as an argument. And in JavaScript, JavaScript has functions which are first class citizen, right? So you can pass function as an argument. You can return function from existing function. And that's what we are going to do that. So this is going to return. So this debounce is going to return another function. Okay. And maybe I'm going to spread all the arguments. So say, suppose we are passing some arguments to this function, right? All those arguments, we can get it here. So this is going to return a function. So debounce is not going to get executed directly. It's going to return a function, and I'm going to take out all of this code from here, and I'm going to put inside this debounce now. So this timeout will come here. Then I'm going to paste this also. So let's cut it from here. Let's put it here. Now this debounce, which is accepting the function. So think like it is a decorator, right? Or a pre-action. And this function is nothing but an action which I want to do. But that function, that action, which I'm going to do here. So basically here, I'm going to execute that function. Right, so I'm holding on, right? I'm holding. So debounce is like a decorator which accept a function, which do some kind of activities. Maybe like here we are checking for the timeout. If the user is already typing, right, then I'm not going to send the caller. I'm not going to execute that fetch movie action. That fetch movie is actually your function, right, which you want to execute. So it's like, shielding your code or decorating your code or putting some kind of precondition to your code before you want to do the another action. So this debounce is a pre-action, and this function is a post-action after that pre-action basically. So this is a check we are putting. So I'm going to call this function using fn.apply. So if you know in JavaScript, we have something called function.apply where, I can pass all the arguments. So I'll take the args and I'll pass it here. Right, or whatever arg I'm getting. So let's do something like args here. Okay. So what is happening here? I'll just show you in the visualization also here. So let's come back to my tab. So our application now. So when I'm going to type something in the input, so let's do the changes in our code also. Okay. So I'm going to wrap my input call. So I'm going to remove this now, or maybe okay, yes, here I'm going to call the fetch movies also. So let's call our fetch movies here with the target dot value. This I'm going to keep it here now. So now I'm going to wrap my on input. So what is on input? On input is a user action where user want to enter some value, and based on that value, I want to fetch the movies. So our on input is action, right? Which I'm going to decorate with my debounce function now. Debounce like this. So I've wrapped my on input with a debounce. So now I have decorated my on input with a debounce. So it's like, adding additional functionality to our on input function. So before that fetch movie is going to get called, right, it's going to check for all the timeout thing, right? Whether the user is typing. Okay, if the user is typing, you're not going to execute this function. This action means this on input. If user has stopped typing, then it's going to call that function. So maybe I'll come back to my tab now and I'll show you what is the idea. So in our application, right, we are passing the action to the debounce function here, right? We are passing the action. Which action? The function. And that function is nothing but a delay function, right? A delay function. I'm passing the action basically through debounce, and debounce has some additional functionality that is called a delay functionality, which I have written, and that delay functionality is acting like a shield here. Okay, so I'm going to delay, and once that delay has been satisfied, then only I'm going to take the action which you have passed here. This is, this is little bit difficult to explain or understand if you're doing it for the first time. But think like, it's a decorator pattern, right? You have a cake, right? And you decorate that cake with some kind of flavors or a cream or multiple color thing and all those things, right? Similarly, our input is like action and this debounce is like a pre-action. The action is only going to happen based on some kind of conditions like this timeout. Once this timeout is satisfied, then only it's going to execute the action. So pre-action, action, if you can remember this concept, probably this is easy to understand. So now I'm going to save, and if I go back, right, to my application, and let's see if it is working fine. So I'm typing INCE. So I'm holding now for 500 milliseconds, and you see the data coming back. All right. So let's do one more addition here, right? So instead of having this hard-coded value of 500, maybe if I can pass that as a delay here, and if we use that delay, right? So let's pass that delay from here, like 500, and let's test the functionality. Right? It is working fine. So now I can change this delay value, right? Maybe I want to change it to 1000, 500, 200, whatever, right? I can do that. So we have created this reusable debounce function. Now it's a good idea, to this is more of like a utility function which can be reused at multiple places, right? So let's move this function to some kind of utility file. Let's do that refactoring. So I'm going to cut it from here, and I'm going to create a new file, new JavaScript file called utils.js, and I'm going to put my debounce function here. Okay. Little bit formatting I need to do. Okay, so now I want to use this debounce function, right? So I need to include this utils file. So I'm going to include this util file just before my main.js. So just so that it should be available and I can use it. Okay. So this utils is going to get loaded, then the main.js is going to get loaded. So now that file will be available to, I need to move this timeout ID also here. So let's put that timeout ID here inside. So that will be good. Save and save, and let's see if it is working fine. So I'm going to type inception again, and we are getting the data back. Okay, so we have the data, right? We're going to render this data into this autocomplete component site. So we're going to open some kind of pop-up here, and we're going to show all those movies, all the 50 movies, or maybe first 10 movies here, so that user can select those movies, and then we can show the information related to those movies. So this rendering part, this UI part, we are going to do in the next part of the video. I think this video is getting longer, maybe 20-25 minutes. So I'm going to stop here. I hope you understood the concept of debounce. Difficult to grasp, but I tried to explain it in easier manner. I'm going to see you in the next video. Until then, you take care. Goodbye, and thanks for watching the video.